Dear all, today we are going to discuss the second part of logical reasoning, which is syllogism. We have discussed three different types of reasoning, the inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning and analogical reasoning. Syllogism comes under deductive reasoning. Here I have also included the previous year question papers from syllogism. So let us see what syllogism means. So syllogism is a specific form of deductive reasoning. Of course, we all know that in deductive reasoning, the conclusion is already there in the premises, or it is contained inside the premises. That is called as deductive reasoning. Syllogism means that the conclusion comes from two premises. One is called as a major premise and the second is called as a minor premise. So from two statements, if the conclusion is coming up, then we call it as syllogism. So it is a specific type of deductive reasoning and it is essential for our critical thinking. So when we want to analyze premises or evidences, it is better that we have large number of evidences, is it not? So if there are many evidences, then conclusion can be arrived easily. So if the conclusion arises from two statements, we call it as syllogism. So syllogism ensures that conclusions are based on valid and sound thinking. If the premises are true, then the conclusion is true, and we also know that the arguments need to be valid for syllogism. So here we have an example. Major premise says all birds have feathers. So that is a noun statement. Minor premise is eagles are birds. So the second statement is actually an added on statement to the first premise. And from the two premises, the conclusion is arising, therefore eagles have feathers. So that is what syllogism means. You have major premise, then a minor premise and conclusion. But when we take the conclusion, we can easily state what are the evidences. So eagles have feathers means eagles or maybe birds. Eagles are birds and birds have feathers. Therefore eagles have feathers. That is the conclusion. Okay, then these types of syllogism statements can be of different types. It depends on how we state the syllogism, the conclusion part. So the first type is called as categorical syllogism. In this type, all the propositions because in conclusion, therefore all the birds have feathers or all eagles have feathers. So all statement is coming, is it not? So the conclusion statement, since every if like statements are coming, we call the statement as a proposition. So in categorical proposition, you have the statement coming as the conclusion as all. Example is all humans are mortal. So that is called as categorical syllogism. So we can state many examples, is it not? All birds have feathers. All swans like to swim, like that. So that is called as categorical syllogism. That means there is no exception to that statement. Then you have hypothetical syllogism. This statement is actually a conditional statement. If something is true, then the other is true, like that. So if it rains, the ground gets wet. This is a conditional statement. It is called as hypothetical syllogism. Then we have disjunctive syllogism. That is the statement is starting with either or. So there is no need to remember categorical, hypothetical, disjunctive like that. You just need to know that statements can start with all, if, either, or like that. Either it is a cat or it is a dog is called as a disjunctive syllogism. So all these statements will arrive in the conclusion part. Then there is a transcendental syllogism. Transcendental syllogism, where these statements all, either, if, those parts may not appear. It can be different. So if the syllogism extends above the above forms, then we call it as transcendental syllogism. Okay. So this is just to know the theory part. So as we have already said, prepositions are the building blocks of logic. So it will start with all, no, some, etc. So all humans are mortal, no man is human, like that. Examples. So if you have a statement like cats are mammals, then you can say that all cats are mammals. Then it becomes a preposition. And prepositions will have a subject or an entity which does something. So in this case, the subject is the cat. I hope it is clear. Then predicate means if the subject is doing something or it is an action done on the subject. Cats are mammals. Are mammals is actually called as the predicate. So every preposition that we write in syllogism will have a quantifier, a subject, and a predicate. So in all the instances that we now come across, there will be prepositions, and we call these prepositions in terms of some names. Just in some names, we actually call in terms of the vowel names. So that is easy to remember. E-A-E-I-O. A-E-I-O are the vowel names that are used to state the prepositions. So we have a type of a preposition where the statements are starting with each, every, any. A type preposition. All is also used. So all men are liable to commit mistake. Every man is liable to commit mistake. Each and every person is liable to commit mistakes, like that. So those prepositions are called as a type of a preposition. So we call in terms of the vowel names. Then we have E type of preposition. The statements will start with no, never, none, etc. So men are never perfect. No men are perfect. All these are E type prepositions. You may be thinking that it is hard to know all these, but we can easily remember all these using a table form, which will be coming up later. Okay. Then we have the I type of a preposition. I type is starting with a few, certain, most, many, etc. So some men are present is an example. A few men are present. Some books are good. Certain books are good. Like these prepositions are called as I type prepositions. Then we have O type prepositions. These statements are starting with every, any, each, all, etc. So some men are not rich. Every man is not rich. Some books are not readable. Certain books are unreadable. Like that, prepositions are called as O type prepositions. So in general, we can consolidate all these in terms of A, E, I and O prepositions. So A type preposition in general form, although we take every man, each man, like that, in general the statement is all yes is P. Okay, so S is some alphabet that we have used, and P is also some alphabet that we have used to generally state a statement in A type preposition. So all S is P. example, all politicians are liars. That is an example. So it will start with A. This is all politicians are liars, like that. So we call this as universal positive. So this is actually a universal statement, isn't it? Saying that all persons are like that. So we call it as a positive statement. If we have a proposition starting with no or never, then it is called as a negative statement. So we call it as quantity and quality. So universal quantity and quality is positive in the case of A statement. Then we have E statement, where we have the statement as no SRP. It's a negation, isn't it? So we call it as negative statement, and here also universal statement, no SRP, no politicians are liars. So it's a universal statement. So first A is called as universal positive, E is called as universal negative. Then we have I statement. I statement, every time it starts with some people, some SRP. So some means particular number of people. So we call it as particular positive. If we say some S are not P, it comes under the O type of preposition. So some politicians are not liars. So it is called as particular negative. So there are typically 4 different types of prepositions, starting with vowel names A, E, I, O. All S are P, no S are P, some S are P, some S are not P. Universal positive is A, E is universal negative, particular positive is I, and O is particular negative. So how does a question come for the examination? That is what we need to know, is it not? So now we will see another thing regarding preposition. This is very important for examination point of view. So one of the things regarding a preposition is its validity. That is referring to the structure of the argument. If the validity or if the evidences are true, then the conclusion is true. So when the evidences are true, the conclusion is true, we state that the preposition is valid. Then truth, there is something called as truth. That actually refers to the reality of the facts. Actually, whether it is really true or not refers to the truth of the argument. So there are 2 statements, valid and truth. So here comes a question which has been asked for 2021 examination. Which of the following statements are true? Validity can never apply to any proposition by itself. That is the first part. The concept of truth can apply to a single proposition. Propositions by themselves can be valid but not invalid. Then last statement, proposition cannot be valid by itself, though it can be invalid on its own. So these are general statements regarding prepositions. So how to do this problem, or how to encounter this objective question, lies in the next slide. We can see just that. So we need to know some key points regarding a preposition. That is, if we look at the first statement, validity can never apply to any proposition by itself. This statement is correct. Validity of logic is actually the property of a logical argument. It is not applied to individual proposition. So if you just have a single statement, you cannot say the proposition is valid or not. So a single proposition can be true or false, but you cannot say it is valid or invalid. So validity can never apply to a single proposition by itself is correct. A is correct. Second statement, the concept of truth can apply to single propositions. That is, if a single statement is given, we can say it is either true or false based on the validity or reality of the statements. So we can say statement B is also correct. So truth can be applied to a single proposition, but validity cannot be applied because there is only one statement. There is nothing proof that is given. Additional premise or additional evidence is not given. Then propositions by themselves can be valid but not invalid. So validity is the property of arguments, we have already said. Propositions cannot be valid or invalid by themselves. So if we have a single proposition, we cannot say it is valid or invalid. So statement C is incorrect or not valid, and last proposition cannot be applied by itself, though it can be invalid on its own. So single proposition cannot be valid, that we have already said. Proposition cannot be valid by itself, but it can be invalid on its own. So that is incorrect. So statement D is incorrect. Therefore, as we have already said, the first two statements are correct. Validity cannot be applied to a single proposition. The concept of truth can be applied to a single proposition. So the answer is A and B, the first and second. The answer is the second statement. So that we need to know. Propositions can be valid or invalid, but validity can never be applied to a single proposition or single statement. Then truth can be applied to a single proposition. That we need to know. Truth applies to a single proposition, validity cannot be applied. If you have to say the proposition is valid, then we need at least two statements. Of course, that is clear. Now, a basic question that comes for logical reasoning is called as square of opposition. So let us see what is square of opposition. So we have already stated that we have A, E, I and O. A is universal positive, E is universal negative, I is particular positive and particular negative is O. So we just write A, E, I and O like this in column format, and here we say proposition in level 1, 2, 3 and 4. So just write it out. So we are going to analyze some statements, whether it is true or false, based on this rule called as square of opposition. Why we call it a square of opposition means this A has got relationship with E, I and O. Therefore A has a relation with all these vowels A, E, I and O. Similarly, E has a relationship with A, I and O. I has also relationship with A, E and O. O has got relationship with A, E and I. So all of these are linked to each other. So how is the linkage possible, or how we can know the linkages is by constructing a table of square of opposition. So to construct the table, we just write the vowels in the column format A, E, I and O, and here we state level 1, 2, 3 and 4. Okay, now what we need to do is we write true. T stands for true in all the diagonal elements like this. So A, E, I, O, true statements like this. So we need to know this by heart. So how to do this in a very simple manner is what I am telling. So T in diagonal format you write. Then now what you have to do is you write false in the diagonal elements starting from A upwards. False, 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 false like this. So diagonally you write true and false. Is that clear? Yes. Now what we have to do is so we have written true here and false here, and once we write false statements, leaving the last two columns, what we have to do is you write wherever we have true, immediately following it you write true. If it is false, you write true. If it is true, you write false. Like that you can fill the other columns too. So when we have true here, you write false. Here it is true, so false. So true here, so false. Like that. Okay. Now in the other columns, that is in the second, third and fourth columns, you write D. D stands for undetermined. So it cannot be determined. It can be either true or false. So in the bottom two rows, you write D. That is how we construct the square of opposition. I hope it is clear for all of you. So first write true in all the diagonal elements, then false in all the diagonal elements starting from the bottommost line. Then in the intermediate levels, in row 1 and 2, you write alternatively true and false, and starting at level 3 and 4, you write D in the other columns wherever it is unfilled, so that the whole table is complete. So D stands for undetermined. It can be either true or false. Okay, so now we will come to the net exam questions that has been asked for the previous years. So here you have the first question, UGC Net 2021 examination. So this column may not be given for the examination, so you have to remember it and draw it in your mind or in a sheet of paper, that is supplementary paper that is given to you. Okay, so you have only these statements coming up. So you need to find out the answers from the statements given. So if the statement some plants are not carnivorous is given as false, what can be inferred from this? So some plants are not carnivorous means it is a O statement. So it is given as false. So O statement we know here. So there is only one false, that is here in the row 1 only you have false statement here. So we can actually mark that as, here you can see a star mark. This is coming here. So this is the only statement here. So some plants are not carnivorous is given as false. So this is the row here. Now from this what can be inferred, that is the question. So some plants are carnivorous is true. That is, some plants are carnivorous is true is what? It is a I statement, isn't it? Particular positive. Some plants are carnivorous is true. So here it is true. That shows that A statement is correct. Then some plants are carnivorous is false. That is not true, isn't it? Because some plants are carnivorous, true is already seen. So it is false is not there. That is not true. So B is not true. Then C, no plants are carnivorous is false. Again you can see here E, no plants are carnivorous. That is given as false. That is true. So A and C are now correct. Then the next one, all plants are carnivorous is true. That is A statement. So row 1, A statement is true, E statement is true, E statement is false, and I statement is true. So the answer comes out as the A is correct, B is correct, and then B is wrong, C is correct, and D is correct. So A, C and D is the answer. The answer comes out as D. So this is a square of opposition. Your question will come out like this. You have to draw the levels 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then also draw the remaining columns based on the rule that we have already seen. Diagonal elements as true, from top to bottom, and from bottom to top you say it is false, and intermediately we write false in all the other, false and true alternatively, and then in row 3 and row 4 we write D. So that is a question that has been asked for 2021 examination. Next question, but there might be some tricky questions also. See here we can see a question asked for 2020 examination. In classical square of opposition, if some S is P is given as true, then which of the following can be immediately inferred from it? Some S is not P is false, some S is not P is true, no S is P is false. Here you can see undetermined is also coming. All S is P is undetermined, some S is not P is undetermined. So we can find out that by drawing this. You can see I have written the question here again so that you can immediately find out. Okay, so some S is P is given as true. Some S is P is true means there are here some S is P is I, some S is P is true, here is true, here also it is true. So there are two truths coming here, but we can find out which row it belongs based on the questions that we are coming up here. So undetermined is coming, undetermined comes in level 3 only, so we have to look at level 3 only. Level 3 is the place, or row 3 is the place where we have to look into, not row 1. Because why? Answers are coming in undetermined rows. So undetermined row is coming as level 3. So let us now look. Some S is not P is false. Some S is not P is false means false. Is it false? Some S is not P. Some S is not P is not false. It is coming as D statement, isn't it? So A is not the answer. Some S is not P is true. Some S is not P is true. That is also not correct, isn't it? Then no S is P is false. That is correct. No S is P is correct because E statement is false. Then all S is P is undetermined. Correct. That is D is also correct because it's undetermined coming up. So answer is C, D, and the last one, some S is not P is undetermined. That is also correct. So C, D, and E is the answer. So we have already given the answer as 2, C, D, and E only. This is how we do the square of opposition. So it is a very important question for the UGC NET examination. The square of opposition comes regularly for all the examinations. There will be at least 1 or 2 questions. So I have come up with 2 important questions. So please learn the square of opposition table by heart, and whenever you have a question coming up, you draw the square of opposition table and do the questions. So thank you.